Whether you love them or hate them, the pairing of Squall and Rinoa has kept Final Fantasy VIII fans talking since the game's release 25 years ago. For some, their relationship represented the power of choosing love over society, one of the major themes of Final Fantasy VIII. For others, the decision to centre the plot on their romantic relationship ruined their enjoyment of the game. No matter your view, if you're a fan of Final Fantasy VIII, you've likely come across some variation of the following sentence. Squall and Rinoa are together because their parents never got the chance to be. This long-running, firmly held belief has plagued Final Fantasy communities pretty much since the early 2000s, which is a shame, because it's completely, totally wrong. Rinoa and Squall's relationship, being some sort of cosmic penance to their parents, kind of misses the entire point that the game is trying to make about love, time, and our relationship to the past. These themes are central to the entire story of the game as a whole, and I think this parental karma idea has contributed majorly to some fans' dislike of the game's romance, which is such a pity. So, let's get into it. About 18 years before the game begins, Galbadian soldier Laguna sits in a hotel bar in Delling City, watching a beautiful woman play the piano. The First Sorceress War is in full swing, but Laguna has very little interest in the conflict. A writer and a dreamer, Laguna secretly longs to become a travel journalist and see the world. He'd also like to be able to talk to women, something he cannot do without developing a nervous cramp. Much to his surprise, the woman, who is introduced to us as Julia Hartley, is charmed by his awkwardness and asks him to join her in her hotel room. Later that night, Laguna wakes up to the sound of knocking at the door. It's his friends Kiros and Ward. The three of them have been given an urgent assignment and they must leave Galbadia immediately. Laguna and Julia sadly bid farewell and plan to meet again. Except they never do. All three men are pronounced missing in action, presumed dead after escaping an ambush in Centra. In his memory, Julia writes the mournful love song Eyes on You, which propels her into stardom and fulfills her long-held dream of becoming a singer. Meanwhile, Laguna, very much not dead, has washed up on the shores of Winhill. He's nursed back to health by a local woman named Rain and her adopted daughter Eleni. Shortly after, Julia marries an army colonel named Fury Caraway, who she fell in love with while mourning the loss of Laguna. A few years later, aged 28, Julia Hartley dies in a car accident, leaving behind a young daughter named Rinoa. Laguna marries Rain shortly before he leaves on a mission to find the sorceress Adele, who has kidnapped Eleni. Rain dies shortly after, leaving behind both Eleni and her newborn son, Squall. That's the entirety of Laguna and Julia's love story. Do you notice how much of that story involves both parties moving on afterwards to partners that they're better suited for? That's because Laguna and Julia are not in love. They don't even know each other. What they are in love with is the fantasy that the other person represents. To Laguna, Julia is another beautiful dream that's always just out of reach. An escape from the drudgery of everyday life as a soldier. And Julia sees Laguna as an escape from her equally unsatisfying job as a hotel lounge musician. An intriguing man who truly sees her as a person and as a star. Either way, what each person represents to the other is far more important than the actual connection they have, which is illustrated by the fact that not being together is actually the thing that causes them to achieve their dreams. Julia's song about Laguna kickstarts her successful singing career. Laguna going missing gave Julia the opportunity to meet her eventual husband and live the life she always wanted. Laguna getting sent away on that mission allowed him to travel the world and become the journalist he always wanted to be. It also allowed him to meet the woman he truly did love. There's a reason the game shows you this scene between Kiros and Laguna. It wants you to know that Laguna had the option of returning to Galbadia for Julia if he wanted to. But he doesn't. He's happy that Julia has moved on because he has too. and he never mentions her again for the rest of the game. This is not a meeting between two lovers with a soul connection so strong the universe has to course correct and put their children together to make up for their separation. This is an awkward one-night stand. So, Laguna and Julia are not a love story, but that doesn't mean that their meeting is unimportant or that it has no place in the overall plot of the game. Because with their meeting and the subsequent choices they make, Laguna and Julia set off a cycle of generational trauma that will impact the lives of everyone around them, especially their children, for the next 18 years. But Squall and Rinoa are not their parents. Unbeknownst to themselves, they break the generational cycle before it has a chance to hurt anyone else, and avoid repeating the mistakes that doomed the generation before them to such unhappiness. They get control over their past, and all because of how they choose to love. Squall values nothing more than being a good soldier, but throughout the game, he's frequently torn between his conditioning to be dutiful and obedient to society and his secret desire to be loved and understood. It's only when Squall abandons convention and his previous life to save the woman he loves that Squall is set free from his own limiting beliefs and inner suffering. In the end, he's rewarded for fighting for his love, because love is literally what brings him back from the dead. Squall chose love, and in the end, love showed up for him. Meanwhile, Laguna, who's positioned throughout the game as more of a lover than a fighter, chooses leadership and duty over love by remaining in Esthar and leaving his wife behind, breaking his promise to return to her, a decision he spends the next 20 years trying to make up for. Laguna chose the military and convention over love, and it cost him his wife, his home, and a relationship with his son. Laguna abandoned love, and when it mattered, love abandoned him and ended up tearing his family apart. It's not hard to see which option, between duty or love, the game wants you to see as the correct choice. In a less concrete way, I'd also argue that Rinoa turns away from her mother's fate, this time by choosing Squall specifically. This is a lot more speculative than Squall and Laguna's relationship, but to me, Rinoa's decision to be with Squall instead of Cypher contrasts Julia's eventual decision to marry Caraway, giving up on Laguna. And yes, Julia doesn't exactly have a choice about giving up on Laguna, but marrying Caraway isn't just turning away from Laguna, it's also turning away from what he represents, a disillusionment with society and a desire to build a more peaceful life. Caraway, a Galbadian military general with a penchant for control, is in some ways a mirror for Cypher. Both appear at first to be rebelling against society, but are, in fact, still working within its harmful frameworks to gain power for themselves. By choosing Squall and not Cypher, Rinoa reverses her mother's decision, going for a more peaceful love over a desire for or a proximity to power. Rinoa allows herself to love openly and without shame, and when her life is in danger, the love that she has put out into the world is always there to catch her. Love provides Rinoa with the freedom to be herself, and unlike her father, Squall provides her with a safety net instead of a cage. Squall and Rinoa have been shaped by the events of the past, but they don't let it shape them. Without knowing the story of their parents, the two of them both come to the same conclusion, that love and peace are worth prioritizing and worth choosing. Final Fantasy VIII is not only a game about love, it's also a game about the power of time. Both the characters and the world itself are shaped by the things that happened 18 years ago during the First Sorceress War. From the antagonist to the protagonist, each character is preoccupied in their own way with changing the past to gain control over themselves and their future. But those who try to change the past by constantly living in it are unsuccessful in their efforts. Only those who are able to leave the past behind find themselves truly at peace and in control of their future. The past is not for repeating, It's for teaching us how to live in the present. Squall and Rinoa learn this lesson 18 years too late to save their parents, but just in time to save themselves. And in the end, it is love that prevails, but only because it was chosen.